Live, where news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Good evening, I'm Maria Garcia. Welcome to ABC-7 Extra. Glad you're with us tonight. For about a year now, a massive taxpayer investment of more than $120 million was in jeopardy. The El Paso Children's Hospital, which voters agreed to pay for to build, was in a financial crisis, at one point even considering bankruptcy. This week, supporters are applauding the first step in this contentious process, the first positive step, an agreement with University Medical Center to move the Children's Hospital forward. Under the agreement, UMC will appoint a new Children's Hospital board. The Children's Hospital CEO will be selected by both the new Children's Hospital Board and UMC Board. The Children's CEO reports to the Children's Board, but also has a duty to seek input from UMC. UMC will essentially forgive $40 million of the nearly $90 million debt UMC said Children's owed it, calling the forgiven debt an investment in Children's. And UMC will provide services at cost to Children's. Remember, Children's said UMC was overcharging it. We have a lot to talk about today. What does this mean for taxpayers? Yes, the two hospitals reached an agreement, but Children's is still on financial shaky ground, some would say. After all, this agreement is just the beginning of making Children's work, and that's bound to be an uphill battle. We're also going to talk what we can learn from all of this. Joining me tonight, County Judge Veronica Escobar and Dr. Lisa A.U. Rodriguez, a member of the elected staff at the Children's Hospital. Email us your comments and questions now to ABC7Extra at KVIA.com. Call us at 915-496-1775. On Twitter, you can tweet me at MariaGABC7 or use the hashtag ABC7Extra. Before we begin our discussion, though, here's a recap of the latest.
Through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. A lot of agreement, a lot of negotiation, a lot of discussion, a lot of communication, and a lot of understanding on both sides of what the needs are and how we can overcome those obstacles.
It was a contentious process, but UMC and Children's have for now paved a new path forward. Though the agreed plan says El Paso Children's will remain a separate corporate entity for at least 4 years, the agreement still gives UMC power to approve Children's budget and make changes to the hospital, though UMC has to notify Commissioner's Court of any of those major changes. This agreement aside, though, the root of the problem is still there. It's turned out to be a lot more expensive to run the Children's Hospital than once thought, though doctors are hopeful.
Because at least the dust is settled in somewhat, but I think as physicians, we definitely feel the burden of being the watchdogs and making sure that children's care is excellent going forward. And if UMC makes some money off that, we're okay with that, as long as the children get excellent care in El Paso, because that's why we came here.
And joining us now are County Judge Veronica Escobar and Dr. Lisa A.U. Rodriguez from the Children's Hospital. Welcome. Thank you so much for staying up late with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
So let's get straight to the discussion. Let's talk about what we mentioned, the root of the problem. It's more costly than anticipated to run the Children's Hospital. Medicaid reimbursements are not forecasted to increase. The cost of services is not forecasted to decrease. Children's still owes UMC about $50 million. So can Children's realistically climb out of this a success? Dr. A.U. Rodriguez, what do you think?
That's a great question, and as a physician, we are not embedded in the finances of the Children's Hospital, but we do know that El Paso Children's so far has had tremendous success. We are filled. The floors are filled. They are as expected, as anticipated, if not better. The services just Friday, the anesthesiologist was saying the record number of anesthesia services that were provided was over the top. It was continuing. It's continuing. Every single service level is just exponentially expanding. So as far as the details of the budget, we, as physicians, we're not privy to that, but we know that the care that is being provided is phenomenal. We're continuing to gain the community support and providing excellent services.
No, there's no question that there's a need for this care, right? And the Children's Hospital is a good thing for the community. I mean, I don't think there's an argument there. But I think it's a stretch to say that the Medicaid reimbursement rates, the decrease in that would be the main thing or the only thing that brought us to this point. I mean, was there a fundamental problem with the rate that the Children's Hospital grew?
So, Maria, I'll answer that. I can't tell you for certain. I can tell you that that's been something that we've heard for a while, that it grew too quickly and was too ambitious after the change in Medicaid reimbursement. I don't think we can be ambitious enough personally. I think that we still have such a long way to go, and we are such an incredibly medically underserved community that we have to commit to this vision and this mission all across the board in healthcare. But with regard to children's, part of what will help, I believe, and part of what makes UMC leadership cautiously optimistic about the finances going forward is that there is Medicaid supplemental funding that is available. And part of the urgency to get the deal done quickly was to meet a state deadline of May 1st for added supplemental Medicaid funding, which could mean this summer between $20 and $30 million for the hospital. That would be an incredible boost in the arm. And then going forward, we would absolutely go after every Medicaid dollar. That has to happen, every Medicaid supplemental dollar. Secondly, we need a far more robust support from El Paso pediatricians, and that's going to be a job. We're all invested in making sure that we have a lot of referrals. And then finally, we're going to have to make sure that we have also a very robust development campaign, a foundation campaign. The hospital district currently has a foundation, does a great job, does some really wonderful work. That work needs to continue, but exponentially. So it's not going to be easy. I guess the message that I'm telling you is, if it were easy, someone would have done it a long time ago. It's not going to be easy, but it's very, very needed and very well worth it.
Okay, and so you laid out basically these steps, these practical things that the hospital plans to do, these funds that they plan to go after. UMC essentially forgave $40 million of the children's debt. That's on top of the $120 million that taxpayers agreed to pay to build the hospital in 2007. So essentially, Children's is costing taxpayers about $160 million at this point. And so,
well, let me clarify though, because this is really important for your viewers to understand. So the $120 million, yes, that is the cost. That's the mortgage for the building. Once the mortgage is paid off, it's paid off, and the building then belongs to the public. And the voters voted on that building. The forgiven debt, folks should know that's not cash. That was unpaid lease payments, other administrative costs. What Children's is still on the hook for in terms of payback is the remainder of it.
But I mean, it affected UMC no
Yes.
matter what. I mean, you saw layoffs
Absolutely.
in the fall, and so essentially, that was money that was owed to taxpayers, to a taxpayer organization that's not going to get it. And there was.
Well, I wouldn't say it's not going to get it. Part of so the next 45 days is what's called the due diligence phase, and over the due diligence phase, the financial folks, part of what's going to be analyzed is the payback. How quickly can the payback happen? The more successful that Children's...
Of the $50 million, though, right?
Right,
not
the cash.
Not of the $40 million that is an investment now that
Right.
has been forgiven.
Right. The non-cash is not going to be paid back. Those were lease agreements that were signed at the beginning, at the inception of the life of El Paso Children's Hospital. And so that's part of what essentially is going into UMC being the sole corporate owner. But the cash part is going to be paid back. The key is how quickly and at what rate, and that's what we should learn over the next 45 days.
No, but for taxpayers who said this was not what was presented to me in 2007, and they still find it disheartening. Yes, this is a positive step forward, but I was pitched a financially feasible, independent hospital.
Right.
And now UMC lost out on $40 million, essentially. It's an investment in the children's hospital.
Yeah, non-cash. Again, I just want to make sure folks understand it's not cash. But you're right. I mean, I think Dr. Ayub Rodriguez would say that she and the physicians are disappointed. I certainly was disappointed. We were all disappointed at the fact that, you know, the universe changed as soon as El Paso Children's opened its doors. I don't think anyone could have seen that coming unless we had a crystal ball. But I think also what I've told folks is when you look at the institution that was built by the physicians, by the board, by the stakeholders, including UMC, it's really an incredible institution. And am I glad that we have it? 100%. Do I think we have to fight to make it as successful as possible? 1,000%. 1,000%. We have to benefit. I mean, we will all benefit from it. When you look at how many jobs that institution provides, over 400 jobs, good paying jobs, jobs in the healthcare economy, those are really important.
I mean, you moved back to El Paso because of the Children's Hospital, right?
Absolutely. I'm from El Paso, born and raised, and always had the dream to be able to come back to El Paso to serve this community. But after training away, I knew that it would need to be something like a freestanding children's hospital that would bring me back. It's the only kind of place that you can trust will be able to invest in the health care of kids and move things forward.
And speaking of that, you know, one of the main concerns that we heard from the physicians when UMC's original term sheet was released was this concern that somehow your recruiting efforts would be crippled if the Children's Hospital was perceived to be a subsidiary of UMC and not truly independent. Under this agreement, UMC still has the power to approve the Children's Hospital budget. Are your concerns quelled in spite of that?
Slightly. We have a little bit of a sense of a relief that we are still independent. We still have our own CEO. We still will have our own children's board that can fight for the advancement of the Children's Hospital. Although we are definitely moving forward with caution, and we hope that all of the parties involved will continue with the same mission.
Now, Judge, you said that UMC has to have some oversight of Children's Hospital, basically to keep that board accountable. There's been some talk throughout this process that the current Children's Board did not remedy the situation fast enough, that they were not proactive enough in the last year to find a solution. Do you feel, Dr. Ayub Rodriguez, that the Children's Board in some way failed the hospital in this last year?
Given the awful circumstances, I think they did the best that they could. Do I wish that things would have been different? Do I wish that things would have been handled more quickly? Of course. And I think there has been fault in all areas on both sides. And I've heard the El Paso Children's Board take ownership of that fault, and I appreciate that, and I think the medical staff appreciates that. They are volunteers. They're people who already have 100% of their life consumed by their job. So are we disappointed that the Children's Hospital had to go through this? Absolutely. Do we fault the board? Not. I think it was way more than just one entity's fault.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about what we can learn moving forward in terms of the process. You know, there was some relationships that seemingly were deteriorated. We're going to talk about that when we come back. You're watching ABC-7 Extra. We're talking about that agreement between UMC and the Children's Hospital. You can reach us at 915-496-1775. Email us at ABC7Extra@KVIA.com or tweet me at MariaGABC7 or with the hashtag ABC7Extra. We'll be right back. Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. We're talking about the agreement between UMC and the Children's Hospital, and joining me is Dr. Lisa Ayub Rodriguez from the Children's Hospital and County Judge Veronica Escobar. Thanks again for joining us. So throughout this year, this got really sour at one time. Relationships seemingly deteriorated between the two hospitals, between county commissioners and the UMC board. How can Jim Valenti and the Children's Hospital have a positive dynamic going forward after a year of tension, essentially?
You know, a lot of it comes from accountability. And so I think that in December, when UMC and Commissioner's Court issues kind of came to a head, one of the things you heard us talk about was accountability and making sure that there is a commitment to fixing problems and there's a commitment to addressing issues the minute that they pop up. In less than 30 days, in 2 weeks, there will be 2 new members of the UMC board. I think that, I know who Commissioner Bettis is appointing, and this person is a stellar, incredible El Paso leader. I'm not sure who Commissioner Leon is appointing. He hasn't shared that with me. But those appointments are going to happen pretty quickly here. And I think you'll see the board dynamic change. I think that the remaining members of the UMC board understand where the Commissioner's Court is coming from, and frankly also members of the public. You know, we expect our partners to work well together. We expect, you know, I said over and over again when we, after the UMC vote, we're on the same team. And I've said this before to the UMC board, I've said this before to physicians that I've spoken to. They're on that campus, we are on the same team. Texas Tech, UMC, El Paso Children's. We should be in lockstep. We should be constantly working together. We should be sensitive to the issues that each institution has, and I think Commissioner's Court has a renewed commitment to making that happen through our board members, and I believe that you will see that happen in the coming year.
Speaking of sensitivity between institutions, this is an email from Evelina. She says, why does UMC get to profit by charging rent on a building that taxpayers paid for? What is UMC going to use that money for? If UMC is able to collect enough money from Children's Hospital, are taxpayers going to be relieved of the hospital tax burden? And of course, she's talking about the rent that Children's pays to UMC.
The lease payment. And one of the things that folks should understand about the lease payment is the lease payment covers depreciation. So when you look at some of the day-to-day facilities improvements that UMC has paid for over the years, they've funded it through depreciation, which is cash set aside. If we don't fund depreciation on the public's building, then the public will end up having to fix the building or to repair it or to upgrade it. So part of the lease payments are so that we don't issue bonds later to fix floors or to do upgrades or maintenance. Depreciation is a really important tool. So that's one of the aspects of the lease. And I know people are sensitive to that, but there is a purpose for the lease, and it's a bigger picture purpose. It's not profiting off of Children's.
Another question from a viewer: why did UMC wait until the Children's Hospital was about $80 million in the hole? How come they couldn't come out and demand their money when Children's was $1 million in the hole?
There were members of the UMC board who wanted to do that. There were at least a couple of members of the UMC board who said, you know, let's cut the contracts and let's cut ties and not spend any more money. That would have been the worst possible thing to do, in my opinion. This is, when you look at this is a hospital that I hope is around for the next 100 years. If it is struggling in 12 months or 24 months, we should not cut and run. And I think UMC did exactly what it should have done. It did what I advocated for and what others advocated for. We need to give them some time so that they can figure out how to make it work. If it can't work, then we've got to fix it. So they had about a year to try to figure out how to make it work. And that's why, you know, near the end of the 1 year period, many of us who had said, hey, you know, we need to give them a chance to make it work, many of the same people, including myself, were saying a year has been enough, but we now have to ink a deal.
This kind of ties in with the rent and how you say people are sort of sensitive to that, but there seems to be this undercurrent that somehow Children's was almost set up to fail because UMC was overcharging it, Children's officials say, and because Jim Valenti helped craft the financial relationship between UMC and Children's years ago. So there were a lot of insinuations throughout the last year that Jim Valenti and UMC had all along wanted to take more control of the Children's Hospital. Dr. Abe Rodriguez, did you feel this way?
This was the talk that has been going on in the Children's Hospital for the last year. It was what was in the physician's lounge. It was the conversations that we had every day. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know what the motives behind the crafting of the Children's Hospital were. I do know that the vision of the Children's Hospital and the mission is now here, and our focus now, our talk has changed in the last week. Our talk has changed to how can we move forward? How can we advance the care for the kids of El Paso? So is there truth behind it? Maybe, maybe not. It definitely is what we've been thinking and what we've been saying.
Do you believe there's truth behind that, Judge?
I don't. UMC has really suffered financially in the last year in order to give children's the ability to try to explore its options. We are cash depleted. We've had a negative audit. We have been downgraded in our bond ratings. That was not the intent for any of us. And so, you know, I definitely understand people wanting to kind of point fingers and see who's at fault. You know, there was plenty of that going on both sides. And from the outside and from the inside, you know, fingers being pointed all the way around. I think what's really important, though, again, as I've mentioned to many people, we've got to have the long view. So we have had 12 months, we'll have probably 2 or 3 years more of challenges. But what we are building as a community, and the reason Dr. Ayub Rodriguez came back, the reason many of us are doing what we're doing is because we're thinking about 50 years out, we're thinking about 100 years out, and we're thinking about what this community deserves for the long term.
Now, but we do have to sort of talk about the lessons we learned from this. So the terms say now that UMC will provide children's services at cost. So does that mean that UMC was truly overcharging children's?
UMC was charging an administrative fee, which is very common in government. And so an example, I spoke with David Crowder last week about this. So the County of El Paso, for example, we contract with the City of El Paso for health services. And so they do mosquito spraying and they do, you know, all sorts of stuff in the unincorporated areas. They charge us, I think they charge us about 10% of an administrative fee because there are costs associated with delivering those services. We do the same thing. When we contract services, whether they be HR or legal services, we don't just charge the cost, but there's an administrative fee attached to it that's very common in government. But with Children's becoming a subsidiary of UMC, albeit an independent one, that was part of the negotiation of getting rid of those fees, which, you know, again, the rest of us in government do pay.
So do you believe then that other doctors like yourself, when you were looking for a job 2.5 years ago, maybe other doctors who aren't from El Paso, do you think that they'll look at the Children's Hospital here in El Paso a different way because of these terms?
I hope not. I think that we, with this term agreement, have maintained enough independence to really still move forward our mission and vision. And I think that we have enough advancements that hopefully we can still attract top doctors to El Paso and move forward. It'll only be time that can tell, but I'm still optimistic about it.
Okay, we have to take a break. We're going to take more of your questions when we come back. Remember, you can tweet me at MariaGABC7 or email us at ABC-7Xtra@KVIA.com. My director just told me that the phone lines are down, so we're so sorry we're not going to take phone calls today, but tweet or email us if you have any questions. We'll be right back. Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. We're talking about the agreement between the Children's Hospital and UMC. And on Twitter, John asks, regarding Medicaid reimbursement, was the decrease caused by the decision of Governor Perry to opt out of the tie-in from Medicaid with Obamacare?
No, but I'll tell you, if at any point the governor decided to capitalize on those federal funds, or if legislators could come up with what they call the Texas way, we would not even be having this conversation. I mean, we are, as a state, walking away from billions of dollars that could really help communities like El Paso, which are not just medically underserved, but which have a high number of residents without health insurance.
So you're saying
But
that
it wasn't factored in. So yeah, to John's point, that was not part of the pro forma back in 2006, the Medicaid expansion.
Okay. Want to ask you, Judge, going back to sort of what a long road it's been. At one point, the UMC board president said you were politically grandstanding when you asked for some resignations. You have been a big supporter of the Children's Hospital for a long time now, and I think that arguably there would be some political fallout for you if this ended up negatively for the Children's Hospital. So was your sort of aggressive efforts with the UMC board that played out so publicly, was that sort of a preemptive political save for you?
Was it about me? No, it was not about me. It was about Dr. Lisa Rodriguez Ayub. It was about Dr. Ross. It was about Dr. Furman. It was about all those mamas and those babies, all those families that deserve better. You know, when I moved back to El Paso, part of what I wanted was a better community as well. And my involvement in politics, you know, I have nothing to gain personally from any of this. My community has a lot to gain, and that is motivation for me. You know, it's asking people for a tax increase to build a hospital. That's not a politically popular move, and so my motivations are not based on what could be politically popular.
Okay, Dr. Ayub Rodriguez, how does the staff at the Children's Hospital move forward? I mean, surely there's been a dip in morale in the last year, and I think there's been a lot of insecurity in the last year. So how do you heal from that?
With time, and I think that UMC, the county commissioners, working on regaining our trust, listening to what the physicians would like, what we need, what the community needs, listening to the pediatricians out there and their concerns, really just opening their ear and really trying to work together. It's going to be time. I think that this is the first step towards healing, knowing that we have an agreement. Okay, we have something written in stone. Now we're all going to watch and make sure that we get the mission and continue the vision and make sure that those kids of El Paso, that they get all that they deserve and more. So.
You know, throughout this process, Jim Valenti also got a lot of criticism, especially when he got that bonus. His contract expires in the spring. Like you said, the UMC board is changing. What's sort of your feel for the future of Mr. Valenti in El Paso?
Well, you know, that will be up to the UMC board, but I think the UMC board has or should have heard the concerns by Commissioners Court loudly and clearly. You know, part of why negotiations were so difficult is because relationships have been so eroded. And we have to do better than that in our community. Because again, we're on the same campus, we're on the same team, we serve the same families, we cannot be at odds.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Judge. Always very accessible. Thank you for joining us on ABC-7 Extra. We hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.
Visit us on the web at KVIA.com.